Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about culture, the next stage that we're looking at in our world building series. There's a lot of aspects that go into this, and I think it's important to probably note that culture can reach many different stages for different civilizations that you're putting into your world, and we're going to do our best to capture what each of those may look like in your course of world building. But there's probably some concepts that we may not be able to touch entirely in this video. So if you do have ideas about it, please leave those comments down below and let us know what you consider when you're building culture for your worlds. Are you looking for a new grim, dark steampunk setting to introduce to your players? Well, Dungeon Brew has created a campaign setting manual called Thegum, and it is now available for your support on BackerKit. It has new rules for magic disruption in regions. There are rules to create your own corrupted gods to introduce to your players. There are new rules for mechanics in regards to the firearms for the new steampunk weapons that are being introduced, and there is new magic, new species, new subclasses, new factions, and so much more that's being included in this manual. You can go download a PDF sample on the BackerKit and see what all we have put into it, but right now we need your dice at our table, so head on over. We'll see you there. But I'm going to start by tossing it over to John and having him talk about where he begins in looking at that culture development for his civilizations.
So the first place that I start usually when I'm talking about a culture is I've got my map, right? And I start peppering the map with locations where I think it's interesting or makes sense for a culture or a people to originate from or to settle down at. Usually, like I said, that's coastlines, it's near fresh water, it's near areas that they can find protection, those types of things. But in general, what defines a culture, at least at the outset, is usually its food source. So, and we have this, evidence of this in our own history where you have a people who settle near the coastline because they want to be able to harvest fish, because fish is an easily accessible source of food. Usually you have people who will follow herds of animals and that type of thing in order to secure food. You also have people who will start to develop agriculture. They start developing, or they usually start with some kind of foraging, potentially. But there's a variety of ways in which a given people can get a source of food, and that is necessary for understanding where the people are going to originate from, where they're going to choose to settle down, and the basis of their culture. Because ultimately, what culture is not tied to their stomachs in terms of this is how we define ourselves. As Americans, we have certain fare that we eat, and you find different fare in different parts of the world. And that fare is determined by where those people ended up settling down to begin with, and you can always identify, a culture based off of the type of food that they serve, and that's, always going to be a starting point in terms of what is necessary for you to be able to begin the process of developing other important aspects of a life as a people.
Yeah, and I think of the same thing that you're mentioning. Whenever I think of a group of people, what brings them together, or got them to start coming together, it has to do with them being in the same region, eating the same foods, finding commonalities with one another, and beginning to group up and recognizing that there's also another key aspect that began the basis of their civilization, and that was a sense of identity with one another and this protectiveness or this sense of security and safety with one another, knowing that in a group we are protected because we're larger. And I think of it just like ancient times of hunter and gatherers or nomads that are traveling about, and how important it was to be part of a larger group and just defend against anything dangerous that was a threat to your well-being and the well-being of those that were also in tandem there to keep you safe to some regard. And so I also think when I'm building those cultures, like what brought these people together? What is that sense of security and safety that they have with one another that gives them that satisfaction of being together and staying together, and how that longevity or that history of having that commonality with one another kept them together.
Yeah, and that's all important in terms of protection and in terms of coming together, and invariably that will feed into the mentality of we are a group. You start to identify yourself as a part of that group, which is where you get tribalism from. It's where you get the idea of I am with people who are the same as me. All of these people are allies, friends, family, whatever it is. And when you're part of that same tribe, you try to protect what you've got. So looking at culture, because this is important in terms of where people fit in. You have a group of people who have come together, usually because it has something to do with the region that they're in, the type of food or fare that they eat, the type of lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. When they are together, they look at, and this is usually in the early stages of culture, they look at anybody who is outside of that group as an other. And when you have somebody who is not part of your group, then there can be a chance for conflict, and this is where you start to see conflict enter into some of these cultures. So you've thrown a people down on the map, and then some distance away you've thrown down another people. What causes them to come in conflict? Are they competing for the same food sources? Are they competing for the same land, and they just haven't come in contact with each other? Is there an otherness, a sense of them being different than you? Because this is something that's true throughout history. When you walk up, you have two ancient civilizations and they walk up and they look at each other, and there isn't a recognition of you're the same as I am. There's a different language, a different appearance, whatever it is. Then you create conflict. And the conflict can be a source of culture as well, whether it's something that's benign, where they're just kind of, competing for the same food, and so there's kind of this, trying to defeat the neighbor next door in terms of how nice your house looks type thing, or does it come to actual physical blows? Or if you're looking at something where you've decided to incorporate something like centaurs or minotaurs into the global repertoire of peoples that exist, there is also a sense of something monstrous, something strange and different and terrifying. So you could have a humanoid civilization coming upon a centaur and considering it to be either food or some kind of monster that needs to be killed, and so then you create a source of conflict there. Or you could have a group of minotaurs who come across humans and consider them to not be worthy of living, and consider them to be good sport, and decide to start hunting them because they're too weak to withstand how mighty the minotaurs are. All of these things start to create, though, cultures for those people based off of the way that they view the world around them, the way they view themselves, and the way they view the outside.
Yeah, I love those ideas. I'm going to now go build a campaign about minotaurs going and hunting people because they're good sport. We'll call it the Great Game. But I agree with that. And bringing this back to our conceptualization of building a world that's based on Greek history or the Greek culture itself, we see that too in how the Spartans' culture was different, the Athenians, the Thracians, and how each one of them interacted with each other and had this sense of sameness and otherness that put clear boundaries between their borders. And I think about that whenever I'm building those borders on my map of like, what separated this border? What is the key difference between these people and these people that allows that border to exist and not dissolve it completely?
Right. Well, and I know that you had talked as well about the Peloponnesian War. So the idea, you not only have the sameness, otherness that exists between Greek city-states, but when it becomes a conflict between the people who are in the Greek city-states or on the Grecian peninsula and the Persians who are coming in seeking to invade, then suddenly you also have a sameness of, well, we're all Greek and you are not. And you get that sameness, otherness that exists as well. It's another source of conflict. In this place, or in this case, it's an overt sense of conflict because the Persians are coming in as conquerors and the Greeks are trying to resist that. But it definitely feeds into that same notion of conflict that exists.
Sure, and I'm glad that we're spending the time on this because up to this point, I think this is where most game masters, dungeon masters go in the course of world building around culture. It's very rarely that I've played in a game that every DM goes that extra step or starts building beyond this point. I think that these key pieces of what causes that conflict very much speaks to just Dungeons and Dragons in general, or any tabletop role-playing game where there's that sameness, otherness, and that causes the conflict within your world. But you can go additional steps in building culture, and we're going to be talking about some of these in our world building steps down the line. But there then becomes this piece of like the esteem of the civilization and these things that are very defining elements of that civilization, how they function. And that includes like religion and economics, politics, even the philosophy of the people and how they perceive things. Like for the Greeks, they very heavily believed in logos and wisdom, and it was a driving force of their rule of thought and the decisions they made within the city, with other civilizations, etc., and how they engaged or interacted, because they believed they had to take the right action based on this inherent wisdom that was given to them. It was part of their philosophy and functioning. But that's another step that you can take in developing each culture to a place that really brings it to life, so that when your player characters are going through the environment, it feels real and fully developed.
Right, and it is from all that. It's when you start getting into higher levels of culture, and again, so here I'm going to backtrack a little bit to one of the first things that you said, which is that different cultures are at different stages of development. Right, some cultures are still going to be tribalistic, warlike, violent towards others who are others, and even violent towards others who are of the same type. So you have Minotaur tribes who are warring with each other because they're not the same tribe, right? So you still have stages of that, but at the same time you can have stages that are far more advanced than that. So you can have stages that have developed art, developed an identity. They do art for the sake of art. They try and develop structures and creations and things like that that will stand the test of time, that prove how mighty they are as a culture, that will prove how much their culture is superior to the cultures that are around them. And this is something that is evident in our own world. If you look at pinpoints in time where different cultures across the world, and you look at them next to each other, you're going to notice that there are cultures that are still violent and tribal. There are cultures that are starting to identify a national identity, and then you also have cultures that have reached a stage of enlightenment where they're trying to establish this beautiful sense of reality for something that is beyond what the other cultures have come to realize. And all of those things kind of mesh together to create a vibrant, realistic world. If every culture is, at a tribal state, then you're probably at very early stages in the world history. But as you move forward, you should be able to start to see, jumps and movement from other cultures as they develop into something that's far superior, or at least far more advanced than other cultures seem to have.
I don't have anything more awesome to add to that. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it, and it's a really intriguing way to approach world building. If there's certain aspects, again, that you guys think need to be added into culture, or even steps that you start with that we didn't necessarily grasp, please, by all means, leave a comment on that. Or if you want us to hear us talk about any of these in more detail, let us know about that too.
Right. Culture is exceedingly deep subject to talk about, and you're going to get a lot more of it as we come through the accompanying videos, because you can't talk about the rest that we have in this world building series without talking about culture.
Dungeon